Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry, apologies for being late, but we'll move swiftly on. Welcome to this session on a just transition to more sustainable livestock systems. I thought it was about time to raise issues around livestock and climate here at UNFCCC. It's a very hot topic at UNFCCC, but not really brought up here, so I thought it was a good opportunity to do so. We're going to start off with a short film. So let's move on to that, and then I'll introduce the speakers.
Bill.
1.3 billion people rely on livestock for food, nutrition, and livelihoods. Source foods provide crucial nutrients that are not easily obtained from other sources. Meat, leather, wool, and milk make up 40% of agricultural value in high-income countries and 20% in low-income countries. But according to FAO, livestock contributes 12% of global greenhouse gases, including 30% of anthropogenic methane worldwide, varying across production systems and regions. About 88% of these emissions come from enteric digestion of ruminants released through belching. The remainder comes from manure. Greenhouse gases, including methane, contribute to global warming and climate change. While today, low to middle income countries and high income countries produce around the same amount of livestock methane emissions, it is expected that by 2050, 66% of global livestock emissions will be from low to middle income countries as populations and incomes grow. This means that we must work to ensure that the development of the sector occurs along a low emissions pathway. Countries need to reduce methane from livestock digestion and manure to hit their climate targets and transition to more sustainable and efficient livestock production. Most currently available methane-reducing technologies target feed. Technologies include methane inhibitors, carnivorous forages, lipid diet supplementation, concentrate feeds, and genetic selection of animals that produce less methane from their food. It's the microbes in ruminant stomachs which produce the methane, and there are ways to alter this. Methane inhibitors that target these microbes can reduce methane emissions by an average of 30% per cow. One of the most promising is Bovaer, scientifically known as 3-nitrooxypropanol. Bovaer has been developed by Swiss-Dutch company DSM Firmenich and is now approved for use in more than 50 countries. For systems where livestock mainly feed through grazing pasture and rangelands, the only effective approach is to increase the productivity of the animal through climate-smart livestock practices. This includes improving feed and forage, health, pasture, and rangeland management. We can reduce emissions from manure using simple interventions like managing moisture and oxygen levels. Microbes which don't need oxygen can convert methane into biogas, which has a double benefit as it can also save use of fossil fuels. What is needed to develop and scale these technologies? First, we need more testing in different livestock production contexts to take many technologies from early stages to practical implementation at scale. Secondly, we need government policies and incentives, such as subsidies, to reduce the cost of technologies together with regulatory standards. Thirdly, farmers need to know about the technologies and require training on how to use them, taking into consideration social and cultural norms. And fourthly, we need to remove financial and market constraints for producers. More private sector investment and public sector incentives. Consumers need the price of animal products produced in a sustainable way to be kept low. If we're going to successfully reduce livestock emissions, the international community needs to come together. We need to share good practices and innovation. We need policy solutions that encourage the private sector to invest and research to fill gaps in knowledge on livestock and climate. Investing in climate-smart livestock practices is the best way to reduce methane emissions in low to middle-income countries, whilst also improving livestock health and productivity. By doing so, we not only help farmers adapt to climate change, but we also reduce livestock's carbon footprint.
So I'm Fiona Ponson, Senior Scientist at Ilri, moderating this session, and I'd like to invite Dr. Stratford Blades, Interim Director General of ICRSAT, to make the opening remarks.
Very good. Thank you very much, Fiona.
It's a great pleasure to be here. I feel like I have to establish my bona fides with this crowd. I grew up on a dairy farm in Western Canada.
I used to be dean at the
University of Alberta, a top-ranked faculty in the world on agriculture.
And of course, now I'm based in ICRSAT, headquartered in Patancheru, just outside of Hyderabad, in the country that produces the most milk in the world. So I think this is adequate. I will just speak, really, these are prepared notes from Ismahan, but I'll just go through. Morning, colleagues. As we stand at the crossroads of escalating climate challenges, the imperative of food security, the role of livestock cannot be overstated. Livestock products are vital for meeting the nutritional needs of the majority of the world's population, especially in low and middle-income countries. Yet, we know emissions from livestock systems must be reduced if we are to meet our climate change targets. I'd like to welcome you to this session on ensuring a just transition to more sustainable livestock systems. On behalf of our CGIAR Executive Managing Director, Dr. Ismahan Elouafi, I extend my gratitude to the organizers, to ILRI, but of course to all of the other speakers that are here as well. Today's session examines how we can make this transition. We'll discuss emerging technologies for extensive grazing systems, their limitations, and explore just, inclusive climate mitigation strategies tailored to the unique challenges of drylands and rangelands. For the CGIAR centers, our shared mission is to deliver science and innovation that advances the transformation of food, land, and water systems in a climate crisis. We've been at the forefront of developing solutions that optimize resource use, intensify food production on existing arable land, rehabilitate degraded areas, and improve land use planning and governance. Just a few examples. At ICARDA, pioneering approaches such as the Toolkit for Sustainable Rangelands Management, which has reduced animal feeding costs by 65% and tripled vegetation cover in pilot areas. Our work on controlling grazing and improving soils is targeted at benefiting all stakeholders in the long term, including herders. CGI, working with national research systems and breeding networks, have released new crop varieties that thrive under stress. And this is true for us at ICRSAT, from CIMMYT, from ICARDA, and so many other of the CG centers, certainly in sub-Saharan Africa, but across the globe. And across the globe, we are developing advisory services for smallholders. For example, the Measure platform, a mobile web-based tool developed by ICRSAT, collects real-time geotagged agricultural data and transforms it into actionable insights through interactive dashboards. Such ICT platforms serve as critical tools for more sustainable land and livestock management practices. I'd like to take a moment to also acknowledge ILRI's significant contributions. ILRI's work on participatory rangeland management has strengthened local governance, improved rangeland productivity, and enhanced livelihoods in pastoral communities. They've released feed varieties that reduce methane emissions and developed a satellite data insurance product for mobile pastoralists in drylands covering over 200,000 people in Eastern Africa. These are but a few of the examples of the ILRI efforts, which exemplify the collaborative spirit and innovative approaches we need. I urge all of us to consider the critical need for a new narrative when addressing climate mitigation in livestock systems. just as the video has shown us, particularly in drylands and rangelands. We must recognize that the global south produces very little emissions compared to the north. Africa, for instance, responsible for just under 4% of historic global emissions. Over half the Earth's, just over half the Earth's surface is classified as rangelands, and 21% of this land is not suitable for a product system other than livestock. For the 250 million pastoralists in Africa, there is no alternative to pastoralism and livestock keeping. It's a vital part of culture and livelihoods. And livestock systems development in Africa produces a triple win. Improvements in productivity can reduce emissions, improve resilience, and produce more nutritious food. But as the video again has said, we must strengthen international collaboration and investment in sustainable land management practices and livestock systems. We need to ensure resources reach those who need it the most, small-scale farmers and pastoralists on the front lines of climate change. The Series 2030 report calls for a doubling of investment in agricultural R&D to end hunger and protect ecosystems and smallholder incomes, including for livestock farmers and pastoralists. And the returns are compelling. For every dollar invested in the CGIAR ag and R&D, investors see $10 of benefits in terms of strengthening smallholder agriculture and protecting ecosystems. So let us commit to collaborative efforts and invest in innovative solutions. Together, we can drive this just transition towards sustainable livestock production in drylands and rangelands. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Blade. So now I'd like to invite Lydia Lanzoni from FEO, Livestock and Climate Specialist, to give us a summary of the recent FEO Livestock Emissions report. She will be online. So I think she's already hooked up, ready to go. Okay.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me and see my screen? Thank you very much for inviting me, and thanks so much to the organizer of this event. I'm sorry not to be there in presence. So the presentation I will deliver this morning has been prepared together with my colleagues, and I'll be mostly focused on the latest global report on greenhouse gas emission from livestock agri-food system that we have been producing and published last year. And specifically, I will focus on possible mitigation pathways that could be applied at global scale. So as some of you might know, in FAO, to estimate greenhouse gas emission from livestock agri-food system, we use GLEAM, which stands for Global Livestock Environmental Assessment Model. And GLEAM is a spatially explicit and life cycle assessment-based model which estimates impacts not only from on-farm processes, but also from upstream and downstream ones. So really it covers all the production and supply chain. GLEAM had been initially developed mostly focused on greenhouse gas emissions, but we are currently working to expand to other impact categories such as carbon sequestration, biodiversity, water use, and others. So here you can see the results of the latest global greenhouse gas emission report. And as you might know, emissions from livestock agri-food system were estimated to account for 6.2 gigatons of CO2 equivalent, which correspond to 12% of total anthropogenic emissions. We can also further break down this figure with more detail in this Sankey diagram. For instance, you see from the left side that the main contributor have been estimated to be cattle, accounting for 62%. And we can also further break down by source. Here in the center, you see that most of these emissions, as was also mentioned in the video, stem from direct processes and especially from enteric fermentation and manure management. In terms of gas source, here on the right, you see that around 64% of emissions are released in form of methane, followed by CO2 and nitrous oxide. Another way to look at emission is with several indicators and metrics, and one of these is emission intensity, which stands for the amount of kilogram of CO2 equivalent, so the amount of greenhouse gas emissions released to produce the functional unit, therefore the final product, with that in the case of this chart here is the kilogram of protein. So the chart that you see presents several box plots, and the box plots are related with the average emission intensity by country, broken down by species, livestock production system, and then grouped by commodity. So on top you see eggs, in the center meat, and on the bottom part milk. So the first information that this chart provides is that the box plot themselves are quite wide. So there is a large variability within livestock production system and supply chains. And therefore, this variability is related with the across-country differences. But an important disclaimer is that we need to interpret this metric with caution, as emission intensity is an indicator of the environmental efficiency of the supply chain, and therefore it does not fully provide a picture of all the environmental and social economic role that livestock production system cover. And so it shouldn't be used to directly compare different livestock production systems among them, such as intensive and pastoral one, for instance, because it could lead to misleading conclusion and sometimes even wrong ones. So we should be careful when using greenhouse gas emission metrics alone. So despite this disclaimer, of course, as I said, the box plots tell us that there is wide variability in emission intensity, and therefore it also suggests us that there is room for improvement, room for mitigate. But in order to understand how to mitigate, we need to delve into the complexity of livestock production system and also understand the future trends in emission and in the sector. So that's why, starting from a work made by colleagues in FAO, we have been estimated the future. We have been projecting and calculating emission for 2050, starting again from a work made by a colleague in FAO that was mentioning that by 2050, livestock production is expected to increase by 20% due to the rise in human population and the increase in the demand of animal-derived products. So starting from this figure, we have been estimated that emission would rise, starting from the base year emission that I just mentioned in the previous slide of 6.1 gigatons of CO2 equivalent, reaching more than 9 gigatons of CO2 equivalent by 2050. And of course, this is not acceptable for several reasons. First of all, we need to ensure food security, ensure and support the livelihoods of million people all around the world. But at the same time, we also need to ensure the transition towards a sustainable and resilient sector. And on top of that, we need to ensure to meet climate commitments. So we need to find ways to reduce these emissions, and in the last report, we have been investigating these pathways to reduce them. So here, in mitigation intervention have been grouped in mainly the way they act on the supply chain. So here we have demand-side mitigation options that here include dietary changes to meet nationally recommended diet and the food loss and waste reduction, which together from literature were reported to potentially reduce emission by 4 to 5%. So another group of mitigation intervention is related with the measures that could be applied directly on farm, so directly implemented by farmers, which covers a wide variety of topic, as you know, and as it was mentioned in the video as well. So we have productivity increase of especially low producing animal, genetic and breeding improvement, feed and nutrition improvement, and also enhance animal health and welfare. And last but not least, rumen manipulation using, for instance, feed additives and other strategies. This group of interventions is extremely interesting, but of course it's dependent more than others on the uptake rate of this technology by farmer. That of course depends on several other factors such as policy support, legislation, also cultural aspects. And so it's really hard to really forecast and clearly, precisely predict the uptake rate for the future. Another important aspect is that here you see broad categories, but these need then to be defined and refined to the specific local condition we are talking about. Because, for instance, using feed additives could be an extremely, first of all, applicable and effective strategies for intensive system, but might not be an applicable solution for pastoral or fully grassland-based ones. So that's why in this case, we could think about other interventions such as improved animal health and management. The last group of intervention and solution is gathers carbon sequestration, circular bioeconomy enhancement, increase of renewable energy use, and also improve manure management. And together, these have been estimated to potentially reduce emission up to 6.6%. So the good news is that we have several ways we could reduce emissions. Of course, this is a global overview. And as you may imagine, many of these interventions can have overlapping, sometimes synergic or even antagonistic effects. So of course, these pathways should be further tailored to the specific needs. But it's important to underline that there is no global single pathway, and that's why we talk about pathways that should be specific for each context. And so again, in order to respect the diversity and heterogeneity of livestock production system of all around the world, we cannot find one size fits all solution, and we need to support the tailoring of these pathways with local data experts, and that's what we are currently working on in FAO. So to wrap up, the key messages of my presentation were related with the latest estimates of greenhouse gas emission from livestock agri-food system, which again accounts for 6.2 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. Another important aspect is that we are lucky because there are several mitigation interventions that we can use in order to reduce these emissions, but this needs to be tailored to specific context. In addition, each mitigation strategy selected must consider also other environmental and socioeconomic aspects in order to identify trade-offs and act accordingly. So only in this way, and also working with local experts, we can move forward in order to promote the sustainable livestock transformation of the sector. So here you can find in these two reports additional information. On the left side, you find the pathways toward lower emission report. That is the one I've been mostly focusing on in the presentation I delivered. But on the right side, you also find a more technical one related with methane emission in livestock and rice system, published by FAO and partners. And here you find all the details if you want to know more. So thank you very much for having me here this morning, and I'll be happy to answer to any question if you have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Lydia. I know it's early in Rome, so really appreciate you joining us today. Now we're going to move on to some of the ways and the different initiatives that are trying to address this challenge of producing food for those that need it, but at the same time moving towards a low emissions pathway. We've got three presenters, and first of all, we've got Sarah Valencia, who working as a consultant for ILRI and the Alliance of Biodiversity in CGIAR, with a long history working on low emission forages, pasture improvement in Colombia. So I'll hand over to you, Sarah, and yeah.
Thank you, Fiona. So, hi everyone. This is my first presentation in English, so I have to say that it's my first time doing this in English, okay? So I have some notes here so I don't forget anything I'm going to say. So today I'll be presenting an overview of Forage's breeding program, and its impact on sustainable cattle production and how it addresses both agricultural and productivity and climate change in the Orinoquia region of Colombia. Is this one? Okay. So the Forage's breeding program was created in the 80s with the purpose of providing improved pastures that contribute to increased animal productivity, reduce environmental impact, resistant to extreme conditions, and also reduce the areas required to respond to livestock demand, as well as reducing greenhouse gas emission and increased carbon captures. So in Colombia, our grasslands are located in the Orinoquia region here. The Orinoquia region is located in Colombia and Brazil. In Colombia, it's also called the Eastern Plains. They're the most extensive grasslands we have in Colombia, and comprises the 22% of the country land. These savannas encompasses the departments of Meta, Casanare, Bichada, and Arauca, and encompass the Piedmont fans, upland savannas, and flooded savannas, with cattle ranching serving as the most dominant economic activity across these diverse landscapes. Also, this region, the Orinoquia region, is the major cattle producing region that has the 20% of the cattle herd in Colombia. These soils, the soils of the savanna of Colombia, are characterized by low fertility and pH. So, the Alliance, the CGIAR, have been working with AgroSavia. That's like the National Investigation Center of Agriculture in Colombia. They have been working in tropical forage grasses and legumes, and also with other international investigation centers, developing a wide range of grasses and legumes for acid soils. So, AgroSavia and CGIAR, they developed Urocloa humidicola. That's a forage that's very adapted to low fertility and acid soils with high aluminum saturations that persist over undergrazing and seasonal waterlogging. So that's the most used forage used in Colombia, especially in the Orinoquia region. Although sexual seeds have low fertility, this can be effectively propagated using stolons, making it more economical than commercial seed sowing. Hacienda San Jose, I'm going to talk about later. They use stolons to propagate the Urocloa humidicola. As for the nutritional quality, it has a low nutritional quality compared to other hybrids developed by CGIAR, but these other species can be more demanding in fertility. So they might need fertilization programs, but Uroclora medicola, we don't use fertilization for the species because of its adaptation. The breeding efforts of the program is focused on improving nutritional quality and productivity right now. So with Uroclora medicola, we passed to have in the savanna regions from 17 hectares per cow to an intensification of 1 hectare per cow. So now we can have more animals in the savanna using Uroclora medicola. It was found that Uroclora has the capacity to capture soil and carbon. I'm gonna show some results we have from Hacienda San Jose. And also with GIRCAS and CGIAR, they have been working on the mitigation capacity of nitrous oxide emissions by Uroclora medicola. That's called biological nitrification inhibition. That's been reducing emission of nitrous oxide from soils. So that's like another plus that has Uroclora medicola. So as for Hacienda San Jose, it's a flagship enterprise for cattle production in the Orinoquia region. It's in the department of Bichada, that's like the last department of the Orinoquia region. And owns a combination of high quality cattle genetics, Nelore breed, and improved pastures, which increase efficiency in cattle ranching whilst reducing the climate impact of its operations. So CGIAR was commissioned by the World Bank to develop a life cycle based model of Hacienda San Jose. To calculate the annual cumulative climate impact of its operation in the period from 2017 to 2023. So the research hypothesis where cattle of high genetics merit have considerable potential to reduce greenhouse gases intensities in beef sector, especially in regions characterized by low animal productivity like Latin America, and the introduction of improved pastures as part of rotational grazing system without grassland burning and chase carbon capture in the soil. So this is Hacienda San Jose. So they use the principal management strategies include the improved pastures. We have here Uroclora medicola with rotational grazing, and we also have high genetic improved breed. Also, Hacienda San Jose has preserved native savanna with no burning and grazing exclusion in Hacienda San Jose connectivity corridors. We have buffer zones in Hacienda San Jose that contains the native savanna, and we have also the forest that we have like small portions of forest in the savannas also. Well, especially where we have the water that's in the savanna. The traditional management in Colombia in the savanna, it's the burning and grazing outside of Hacienda San Jose, as you can see here. That's the traditional management outside Hacienda San Jose. So the life cycle assessment at the farm level was based, this model comprises high quality genetic research, breeding stock, wean heifer, embryos, and semen units for market calf farms, cull animals and wean calf for market. The market was cattle fattening farms. So this was under the boundary of cradle to gate farm, cattle farm to cradle to farm gate, including upstream activities such as infrastructure and production of feed supplements. Relevant greenhouse gas emissions and removals were quantified to calculate the carbon footprint at the farm product level. The estimation of climate impact was completed through calculation of carbon offsets occurring in the forest outside the production system, but still within the boundaries of Hacienda San Jose, and through quantification of avoided emissions from improved management practices. Also, in Hacienda San Jose, those avoided emissions are the no savanna burning inside the farm, okay? So some of the results was, as for carbon intensity, we had 8.4 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilogram of live weight. That's 46 lower than breeding farms in the region. Soil carbon sequestration potential of 2.5 tons of CO2 per hectare a year. The negative carbon footprint was minus 17 kilograms CO2 CO2 equivalent per kilograms of live weight, and additional avoided emissions that was no savanna burning. So what are the next steps of the studies carried out at Hacienda San Jose to validate, certify, and sell carbon credits? The project was already submitted to Vera, so we're doing that. Test the new genotypes of Udiochlora nidicola, red lines and promising germplant accessions for eco-efficiency. Test strategies to reduce methane emissions from cattle using feed additives and low methane forages, and test strategies to improve soil carbon captures. So this work is done by Jacobo Arango from the Forages program and his team. And that's all. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks for keeping to time. So now I invite Pedro Herrera, who's ecologist, land use planner, been working in the pastoralist world, silvopastoral world for many years, part of the advocacy and influencing for the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists. Also contributed to, well, led UNCCD's Global Land Outlook report, and now works for FEO, amongst other things, supporting COFOOD, the Committee on Forestry. So over to you, Pedro.
Oh, thank you. Slide. So, good morning. Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, CGIAR, for having me here. Well, the first thing that I have to say is that there is an event here at. Okay, way better. Thank you very much. That we have an event here at 3 o'clock where we are going to continue the discussion that has already started here. So I inviting you, and as I'm a bit of a mess, I didn't do enough dissemination of the event, so it's grateful if you also invite some other people to be here. Okay. I have a presentation, but I think I need to state a few things before going to the silvopastoral thing and the climate change. I'm trying to bring here the land because we have been talking about the livestock and the emissions and so on. So let's shift a little bit the focus through the land. Let's adopt a land approach. So the first thing that I'm going to say is quite obvious, but anyway, we need grazing. We need grazing. We need to graze the land. The rangelands need to be grazed to produce, need to be grazed to develop their ecosystems, their biodiversity, their ecosystem services. So whenever we are talking about emissions, about impacts, let's keep in mind that we need the grazing and the pastoralists, because grazing is not automatic. Okay, it would have been automatic when people weren't around here because the big flocks were moving up and down, following the weather. But right now, with our infrastructure, with our society, they need to be managed. And that's what pastoralists do. They manage the grazing for the best outcomes. The best outcomes is their food, for sure, their livelihoods, for sure, but there are also outcomes for everybody. Let's say the vegetation control, let's say the mobilization of sources of slow nutrients that, let's say, ruminants do quite well. They use bare cellulose, bare fiber, and transform it into, sorry, and transform it into top quality foods. So that's also important. So they fart, of course they fart, and they produce methane, and we have to be aware of this, and we have to control this too, because the climate change is clearly a big problem. And once said that, it's important to know that it's a different problem, the one from the emissions of grazing animals than the emission of the intensive animals. And it's a different problem, the one on the developed countries than the one of the countries on rangelands, because they are not the same dependence over meat production, over dairy production. On one side, the many countries in rangeland depend on this production for their basic nutrition. Countries can shift from 5 minutes. Okay, so once said the important thing, I'm going to go through the project. So we are trying to promote resilience and adaptation in dry area and improve way highlands forests and silvopastoral systems are managed. So a few years ago, FAO published the report Grazing with Trees. Well, here try to address silvopastoralism as a key management system for certain rangelands and drylands. Okay, let me be clear. I'm not advocating for planting trees the rangelands. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that areas, having trees, having shrubs, can improve the way the land are managed and can improve, maybe you already understand, can extend the timeline of the forage, can protect livestock from the weather, and it has a lot of benefits, but it needs to be clearly well planned and well developed. So we delivered this, and as a side target from this report, we thought that silvopastoral systems quite important possibilities in terms of addressing climate change. First, because they can tackle simultaneously mitigation and adaptation, because that's something, well, we are talking about emissions, but the grazing systems, the livestock systems, need also to be adapted to the climate change. Otherwise, the high temperatures, the extreme events, the drought periods are going to take a heavy toll on these systems. And, well, we are already talking about vulnerable lands, so let's say. So we started in coalition with the Biodiversity Seat Alliance, a global assessment to address how silvopastoral systems could be targeting carbon storage for improving mitigation. We started with literature search, of course, trying to address what's already been done and where are people researching on these topics. It's quite interesting because silvopastoral systems are widespread all over the world, but have been very little recognition. Probably because they mix a lot of things, and when livestock and trees and people and grasses are mixed, the pot, it's kind of difficult to address. So very few people has there to say, okay, let's take it all together and see what happens. How can we improve that? Okay, we can improve that. The first thing to do is, after recognition, is talking to the people who are actually managing them, because they know what they are doing. Okay, we have our targets, but those people are already managing this in very harsh conditions, and they are obtaining benefits. And they are the main impacted if something wrong happens, like the climate change. So we try to deliver evidence on how these silvopastoral systems could be improved to store more carbon, and then storing more carbon, they would also be more productive, and they would also deliver more ecosystem services. So we are trying to map the existing carbon reserves in dry pastoral systems, specifically targeting drylands, because in FAO I'm working with the working group on drylands, forest, and agro-silvopastoral systems. We are the only statutory body in FAO working with countries in drylands. And so we are quite interested on delivering this kind of approach to the country members. Then we will try to model the carbon behavior in the traditional and modern silvopastoral systems. We try to learn from the tradition, but we have also a big amount of research already done in silvopastoral systems, especially in countries in South America, in Africa. So let's also mix those different knowledge, and let's say, what's the room for improving those silvopastoral systems in a way that they store more carbon? And our first findings, we will discuss this later at 3 o'clock. Our first finding show that actually there are quite room to improve them, and that they could be needed in in many rangelands to improve the way that livestock managing is adapting to the climate change. So this is more or less what I wanted to bring here today. Thank you very much for listening, and hope that the discussion goes on and on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I think the end messages come back at 3 o'clock if you want to know more. Okay. Okay, so move on to our third presentation, and I'd like to invite Ishani Wheeler from the Open Geo Hub, who's working with the Global Pasture Watch on a new initiative to map pastures and bring together data at a global level. So over to you, Ishani.
Okay, thank you for coming, everyone. Okay, so I am from this little one here, but I'm going to talk about work done by everyone on this initiative. Okay, so what are we? It's not really, it's a project. It's not a platform. It's a consortium. Yes. So convened under Land and Carbon Lab. GLAD was very nice to give us Landsat and ARD2 back catalog. CGIAR is doing the validation. IDIV gave livestock data, and Cornell is working on updating emissions factors. I'm sorry, these are not ready, so I can't bring these to you. And Open Geo Hub and LAPIGI, we are the data nerds crunching everything. Okay, before I talk about data, we put a lot of effort into how we are going about the process of what we call the pipeline of creating data, because we don't think that it's relevant to make a data set and give it and write a paper and run away. They need to be updated. They need to be fit for purpose. They need to be modifiable to different countries' needs, and their geospatial experts need to be able to pick them up and modify them easily. So we're aiming for essentially community, and to build up a community of researchers specifically in coding development, software development, to produce this data. I will show you the first versions, because it's one thing to talk, it's another thing to go, here's the basis. Okay, so on this process, we've been through making the reference samples. It's about 2 million interpretation reference samples. It's a Brazilian view of grasslands of the world. So I'm very happy to bring a Southern Hemisphere view of what the world is and classify it. It's very enjoyable to watch all the Europeans and the Northerners get uncomfortable. I'm from Australia, so. Okay, and we're going through production and then moving into feedback gathering now. So the first one is grassland extent maps. They will come out in a few days' time, and you can go look at them and poke all the holes and tell us all the problems, please. It's set up like that, so we can take that information and remake it again and again. They're available on a variety of platforms, not our own, but you can put them in your own. Please do. There's no restriction. They're CC by attribution, which means you can build commercial products on top. Fine, go nuts, have at it. I'm happy to talk about classification with people later. It's a very juicy topic, so I'm not going to open it now. Okay. The next product, grassland productivity. So this is grams of carbon per square meter per day, gross primary productivity. Essentially, we did everything, even though we're just looking at kind of grasslands and short vegetation, but we ran it all anyway. The most important thing at the moment, it's submitted for publication, and then once the publication is through, the data can be released. Applications at the moment, our testing is going through Backbone for local biomass estimation, which is probably relevant for this crowd. Because if you know anything about biomass data, global, top down, by the time you get to a field, it's not very sensitive to what's actually going on. So this is using some of the newer algorithms, the newer techniques that would allow a local place to provide a subset of data, and we would refit the whole global model. That's the point of it. Yes, should no longer just be top down or the bottom. It should be both. Okay, next one. Livestock density maps. My least favorite, sorry, partially because the data is really difficult to work with. We're still stuck in the models on this one. We're doing our best with the census and survey data. We're scraping everything we can get our hands on. And then we're using like spatial allocation models to go, okay, how much does an animal eat? Where would it roughly be? We know it's in this country, so that's kind of your density spread out. As you can imagine, there are issues. We're still working on it, and we hope to have something useful by probably early next year, maybe March, I think, for this one. Yeah. Also, I didn't mention all of these products are essentially 2000 to 2023. So we're processing the whole catalog. So they are available for the whole period and can actually be used for things. Not that I don't like Sentinel Europeans, sorry, but we need the whole time series. Okay, this one was the surprise data set out of it, short vegetation height. So instead of looking at trees, we said, hey, stuff that's not trees, that's, you know, most of the land surface, nothing against trees. Forest, I should say. This is a height product, so it's not color-based. It's not like trying to look at like a photograph. It's measuring the actual height, right? It's taking a median height. And what we're seeing for this is it's actually quite useful for spotting change of the type of, so think like global forest watch kind of alerts. It looks like it's quite useful in that direction, but for the shorter vegetation. So a lot of people get excited about this. It was a surprise, but it appears quite useful. Also, there's a lot of work separating grass from shrubs and shrublands. So if anyone understands the shrublands, please come talk to me after and help me understand more about them. I'm a soil scientist by training, so I'm usually care what it grows in. Okay, and it's being used for restoration monitoring quite a lot, the early test cases. Okay, use cases. This is there's early users who are testing the data before it's released to go, what can it actually be used for? So one example is being used in Brazil at the moment as a part of a financial mechanism yes, to incentivize behavior change on farmers. Essentially, their funding is tied to particular ways of doing or outcomes. They get a lower interest rate, right, on their loans. So this is satisfying some of the pressures from the financing community that they need to justify the impact of their debt on various outcomes. So it appears useful. So, all right. I put a couple of other slides in there as well for people for other LDN data that we're working on at the moment. Okay, this is one, it's ensemble land cover. Okay, thanks. So land cover is, yeah, there are a lot of different sources. They all have different strengths. So we're trying to work on the methods to combine them together and ensemble them together to fill in gaps, to deal with legend issues, etc. All of this work and all the slides I showed you before, it's all open source and it's all open access. So anybody should be able to use it, any researcher, pick it up, change it, do something. Okay, one more, last one. We also have a research line at the moment, which is ongoing forever. Soil organic carbon modeling through time. This is a data-driven model. We're in the process of bringing in so machine learning, data-driven plus process model together, because the data-driven alone is just not quite enough. At the moment, this one I'm showing is 1 kilometer for a long time series. So it works great. We can make predictions. What we want is good, solid, defensible uncertainty per pixel. Then it's usable. So until then, it's a pretty picture. So it's in development. It won't be published, but should be finished by the end of the year and published early next year. It will probably only be 5-year time steps, because the uncertainty on annual is not good enough. But the purpose of it is actually not the data itself, it's the structure underneath to allow it to be updated at project national level and connected together. So this is where I say something about a consortium of researchers which could grow. We want to see this done. It should be tier 3 available anywhere for UNFCCC. And I'm out of time. I think that's it. There are other applications people use it for. Please, if you're interested, have at it.
Wonderful. Thanks very much. And you have another session later in the week, don't you? Tomorrow, if you'd like to learn more. So, yeah, and we won't have time for questions now, but if you'd like to talk to any of the speakers outside after the session, please do. So now we're going to ask 4 different stakeholders their response to some of the issues that have been raised today. And I'd like to invite Sophie Elmer from 4Paws, Leanne Winowicki from ICRAF, Jacob M. Papai. I don't think I've ever had to say your name before, from the African Youth Pastoralist Initiative, and Matthias, is Matthias Jasnoka? Jasnoka? Okay. Yeah, from the European Carbon Farmers Network. So I have some questions for you, and if we do have time, we can take a question from the floor as well. But let me start this off. So Sophie, you work a lot promoting better animal welfare and animal health. How important do you see that in terms of and its contribution to more sustainable livestock systems in the work that you do?
Great, thank you. So just to pick up on what Pedro said earlier, grasslands and grazing animals are co-evolutionary partners. They've evolved for millions of years together and they should be on the land. So if we take that as the basis of our kind of health and welfare, then it's a good place to start. So I'm really happy to be on this panel. On the other side, we talked a little bit about intensive farms earlier, particularly in high income countries. And in those types of systems, we are producing animals for maximum output. Now that inevitably hinders their health, and it makes them more prone to chronic conditions because of the way that they're bred. And it weakens their immune systems. So they're more prone to disease, which is what FAO were talking about earlier as one of the ways to kind of deal with animal health for productivity. That's because their energy, which could go into meat or milk production, is diverted to fighting off illness. When they're kept in these intensive conditions, they're also prone to chronic stress, which is again having an immunosuppressant effect on them. Now, when we get to extensive production systems, animals are stocked at lower densities. They are outside with fresh air and natural light, and that diminishes the risk of pathogens and contagious diseases, which also has an impact on reducing AMR. The other thing that I'd like to point out is the high genetic diversity in farmed animals is the basis for environmental suitability, climate tolerance, and disease resistance, as well as the qualitative and quantitative performance of breeds. So to give you an example, if you import a highly productive European breed like a Holstein into hot climates, they're just not adapted to be there. So it negatively impacts their health and their welfare, and it will impact the meat and milk yield, which then has an impact on livelihoods and nutrition. So that's why we kind of want to think about locally adapted breeds, particularly in these extensive systems. So we know I have a case study in the Sahel where we have locally adapted Senegalese goats and cattle, and they are also biologically more able to consume the local feed and fodder there as well. In terms of the climate mitigation that can be achieved in livestock, basic husbandry and welfare changes are quite a good way of doing this, and they don't take a lot of capital. One of the ways we can do that is by reducing stress. Now, grazing animals, ruminants, are herd animals. So the way that we manage their social interactions can really impact their stress and their health. It can also impact their grazing choices negatively or positively. So we can also use the fact that they're social animals in how we kind of manage our land. So it can be used for a positive way of field rotation, for example. If you reduce stress from negative handling or the stress of not being with your social group, then you're also able to impact positively meat and milk yield. And then I'd also just point out that some of the methods we heard earlier about reducing emissions, particularly when we kind of manipulate the rumen, aren't really appropriate for extensive outdoor systems, which, as I said earlier, is where we would like to see animals out on the land. You can't really administer feed additives when you're moving cattle or sheep or goats out across the range, and it's not really where we should be focusing interventions on animal health or welfare. So we should think more about improving vaccination or other interventions that are actually therapeutic rather than prophylactic or manipulative. So yeah, I don't know if you want me to stop there or...
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, great. Thanks very much. I'm going to turn to Lee. So Lee, you spend your life with your hands in the dirt, basically, with your soils. There's lots of talk about the potential of improving soil carbon to offset livestock emissions, amongst other. Can you tell us, how viable is that, and what's the kind of things that we need to be doing to improve soil carbon?
Thanks, Fiona, and thanks for inviting a soil scientist to your panel. I am so pleased to be here to celebrate Soil Day, which is today, because as we know, soil provides so many ecosystem services, and I loved Sarah's graph. Please remember it. She had a graph of the different rooting systems of perennial grasses. And she showed that when you have deeper roots and more diversity in the root architecture, you can store more carbon in the soil. And there was a recent study that actually showed it's not how much biomass necessarily above ground that increases the soil carbon. It was the diversity of the grass species and the diversity of the rooting architecture that actually increase the soil carbon. So that's one solution. And we're absolutely doing that a lot in the northern rangelands in Kenya to really diversify the grass species there. I also wanted to point out that Lydia's slide. So for those of you who love box plots, I love box plots. I know Birta does. She, I think, produced some at CGIAR on the forages. The box plots show the variation and what she was showing in greenhouse gas emissions by animal type. And she highlighted that this variation indicates that we could actually do a lot to target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And one of her bullet points was with environmental concerns. Well, this is my point. I think that we absolutely can make that link between soil health, rangeland health, and animal health, because healthier rangelands produce more nutritious, can I say feed, right? Grasses that can improve animal health. And that's what we are doing at C4ECRAF. Yes, World Agroforestry, we're not about planting trees in rangelands. We're about translating science into action. And we have a robust monitoring framework called the Land Degradation Surveillance Framework, where we are assessing soil health, land degradation, vegetation diversity, and specifically looking at rangeland health, perennial grass diversity, annual grasses, and don't forget the forbs. That was one thing I want to point out that I felt was missing in the presentations. Grasses are important and I love them, but also we need to look at the forb species, particularly the nitrogen fixing species that the animals love and that puts nitrogen in the soil. So as Ishani mentioned, many of the maps that we have right are not ready to be used by managers because they're not accurate enough, because we need these data. And that's what we're doing. We're doing robust field sampling, geolocated across rangelands, across Africa, and hopefully soon in Latin America, to build this database to be able to make that link for One Health.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lee. Jacob, you're the leads of the Africa Youth Pastoralist Initiative. Yeah. What do you, as a pastoralist, you think about all of this that's being discussed here?
First of all, thank you so much, Fiona, for this chance. And good morning and greetings from rangelands from Africa, pastoralist, and Tasupa. Oh, it's just me that knows that. Thank you so much. Just to reflect on that, I can say that youth, pastoralist youth, I cannot say in Africa, but pastoralist youth have a very good perception, and they know the realities of climate change and its impacts on rangelands and the pastoralist communities, because they are being affected firsthand. So they are contributing less to climate change, and it's affecting their livelihoods, it's affecting their cultural heritage, the animal, and everything that surrounds them. So I can say that for pastoralists, it's something that is lived. These are challenges that are lived with them. It's not just an abstract concept that we can say it's something that may be there, but it's something they live with each and every day, and it has affected them the way of life. And I can say that from since these pastoralists have been existing in these rangelands, you can say this pastoralists have been conservative in nature, yeah, by the way they're living. We're talking right now on regenerative agriculture, that is rotational grazing. This is something that I've been practicing for so long. It's just that there was no voice and there was no one to come and say, this is what is going on. So it's just us now going back to what they have been doing to say that this is sustainable. But all along they've been living sustainably. And I can say that because the way they've been living and having their livestock, the soil carbon there, apart from the recent areas, there is a lot of pasture, protected pasture that is in grasslands, and this pasture, these grasses are contributing much in carbon sink, which is most of the time they use this protected forest for their rituals and their traditional ways. So they conserve this forest to practice that. But we realize right now that their protection, their conservative nature is now bringing down and consequencing the carbon. So I think that way of life has brought them to these rangeland restoration practices in communities like the semicircular bounds where they plant their pastures there, and to reduce the carbon and also to reduce the herds have been forced. As you know, Fiona, in Kenya, we've had just last drought 2023, which claimed like 3 million livestock from pastoralists. That's like over $2 billion US, and it's their livelihoods we're talking about. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure, I'd love to discuss more, but yeah, we do need to finish on time. So Matos, you lead the European Carbon Farmers Network. I was interested to see over the last couple of days that the methane inhibitor that was mentioned in the film has kind of come at the source of a food scare. So there was a Arlie Milk had taken up the testing of selling their milk that have been produced using methane inhibitors, but it's become a great food scare now, and people are throwing away milk, and it's been all swept up by the media. So, you know, in this kind of context where there's lack of information, but on the other side, you're being pushed to reduce carbon footprints in agriculture and particularly in livestock. What are you as European farmers doing, and how are you tackling these issues?
Thank you, Fiona. Pleasure to be here. Happy World Soil Day, indeed. And thank you for this important discussion. Your question is amazing because being in this discussion, in this engagement, I'm thinking about the phrase that I thought I will come with anyway, but it really fits the discussion, which is, it's not the cow, it's the how. And I think we can apply that to all of the big topics that we are discussing. It's not the grass, but it's which grass with which roots, in which space, each which tree, where, how does it serve? So as a farmer who's running a farm that has multiple stories of transition, and on those stories and experiences, European Carbon Farmers is built on the mission of building a farmer-centric bridge between climate and agriculture policies. So first of all, we know with our first-hand experiences, you can farm in a way that is responding to climate needs, biodiversity needs, and others, and produce food of the highest quality. Those two or those three, those four go very much hand in hand. And to share a little bit more, as I am participating in the discussion we are having today, I'm thinking about two groups of insights. One is, hey, we are doing already so much, and there's so much to celebrate. And examples are countless. We as a farm, we are producing hay which we are supplying to the market, which responds to needs of livestock producers, but we play a very important role, especially when weather shocks emerge, especially droughts, which are present in Poland as well, so that those farmers who have livestock can benefit from our hay in those moments that are more that are happening more and more often those days. So they can run they herd at the levels that make sense. We also work with trees. We have Horizon Europe project which deals with agroforestry, and we are at the beginning stage of learning how to plant trees, how to look after them, because we don't have that knowledge. So there's a lot we are doing. And similarly, with the Colombian examples of monetizing carbon in the soil and using that as a tool for further transformation, I can speak to that as well. But I also see, while there is a lot to celebrate, and that's amazing, we are still treading that path. So much more to do within our own context, and especially I think sharing knowledge from global south to global north to global south, and south as well. And I have full page of notes here with some key follow-ups to basically all of the speakers. So very excited to be here. And as we are framing the discussion, rangelands and livestock and pastures are part of the solution, and the question is, how do we make them continue being part of the solution? Because they can certainly be. One last thing, if I can, visit a farmer. I've been to a farm yesterday here in Saudi Arabia. It was, as expected, life-changing experience, very impressive farm. And whenever you go to the COP, please make the number of farms you visit in the country which is hosting the COP equal to the amount of COPs that you have attended. And we can go together in Brazil.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the speakers for keeping to time. I'd like to have had more, and I'm sorry for the late start, but we've managed to get back on track. So I'd really encourage you to speak to all the speakers outside, keep the questions going. So to wrap up, I'd like to ask Berta Paul from GIZ to provide some closing remarks.
Thank you. Excellent. Should I sit? Should I stand? Okay, good. I know we are over time, so I'm not going to keep you for very long. For those of you who don't know GIZ is one of the institutions that implements the German Development Corporation. So we are implementing the technical cooperation, and our development bank, KfW, implements the financial cooperation. MZ is our main funder, especially in the agricultural division. Yeah, so that's the Federal Ministry for Economic Development and Cooperation. Our livestock portfolio environmental considerations have always been the main entry point, I have to say. And this is, of course, why I'm happy to be part of this session. Yeah. So it has been climate, but increasingly also biodiversity and land restoration aspects that really are our entry point into international livestock development. So in that sense, we have been supporting a variety of activities. I mean, for example, the program for climate smart livestock that was implemented by IRRI and the World Bank. We have also been supporting the FAO Glean tool and many other tools. And currently, I'm leading a new global program that focuses on strengthening key actors in the policy and finance arena in strengthening environmental considerations in livestock development. So now let me share with you three reflections actually from listening to this very important session. And maybe, yeah, that's a bit my takeaway. So first of all, in extensive systems, I think we agree mitigation and climate protection can only be a co-benefit, right? That cannot be the main entry point into climate in extensive systems. I was very glad that during the session, there were a lot of solutions highlighted that are actually synergetic between productivity increase, adaptation, and mitigation. There is better feed, and Sarah talked about that, pastures. There are better grazing management for soil carbon. There was extensive talk about, very happy. And there's animal health, the new kid on the climate block, I have to say. One Health is coming up corner and joins the more environmental. I don't know if it's the mic or, okay, now it's. Secondly, I was super happy to see that while emissions at animal scale matter, there was a lot of talk during this session on landscape level emissions. And I think that's very important. So we cannot just look at the animal and reducing emission intensities from the animal, but we have to look at livestock within the landscape that it's actually operating. Yeah.
So we talk about trees, Pedro was talking about that. We talk about soil carbon, Lee and many others. The Pasture Watch talked about that. And also avoided burning. That's also part of landscape level emission reduction, right? And then lastly, my last reflection, and that didn't feature very strong in this session, but yeah, from my point of view, I mean, incentives are very important. So we talk about financing models, right? And I think there's more and more financing models that are coming up. I mean, World Bank, other on this financing institutions. How can we build in incentives? Yeah. So in Uruguay, there's a new project that ties the interest rates to reductions in emission intensities. There is the World Bank also has another carbon fund that looks at carbon funding from a landscape level and tries to integrate livestock. So I think that's really important for the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. So that's the end of the session. Please continue the conversation.